people in this. Do you believe that there are some people? That there are some people in this world that did not tune in to the Alliance Vlog podcast. Shame on you!
Shame on you. My name is Ella Indy, and I'm one half of the NWA Women's World Tag Team Champion.
And I'm Kenzie Paige, the other half of the NWA World Women's Tag Team Champion.
And you better go listen to the Alliance Vlog. What is it called again?
Podcast. Period.
Or you're ugly. You're Power approved.
Mi gente, you already know who it is. It's the radioactive pop with Danny Limelight, United Wrestling Network World Heavyweight Champion. And make sure you tune into the Alliance Vlog every week. You heard it here first. Straight from Bocca.
Hey guys, check this out. I am officially now sponsored by Dubby. Dubby is a clean energy drink made to give you focus with no crash. If you guys are like me, you're always needing a burst of energy, especially with one with no crash. Dubby contains vitamins, amino acids, a nootropic, and 150 milligrams of caffeine. It keeps me awake with no jitters, guys. Check it out. Merch link is in the bio. Dubby.
Are you ready?
Power.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
I'm building an alliance.
God bless the internet.
Okay, let's party. It's showtime.
It's time for the Alliance Guys podcast with your hosts Kevin Frazier, Jaden, DKM, and J. Cal.
Speaking of G.I. Joe, where does Sgt Slaughter rank as most famous wrestlers? Top 20. I mean, look, you got to give him his due. He was an action figure, like, you know, G.I. Joe literally made him in a cartoon and an action figure. What's funny is he didn't voice the cartoon.
Yeah, he did.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah. Slaughter was brought in. He did the skips in between, and he did the voice. He's one of the very few people who actually, well, not that there are real Dukes and Scarlets and Lady J's laying around, but
right.
He was an actual person for his voice.
I thought I remember that not being the case. Now, I'm not saying I'm 100% right.
He has they have a podcast right now with him on there, and I have it. It's one of my YouTube. Occasionally, I pay attention to something out there, and they were talking about his time with G.I. Joe.
You're right. Okay, maybe I was confused because they list him as his real name on the IMDb. But yeah, Robert Remus, Sgt Slaughter, 8 episodes.
Yep.
Okay.
But anyway, when it came to the time, Slaughter was incredibly huge in the 80s. He actually toured the White House for Ronald Reagan. He used to travel around in a camouflage limo, go around. He had a rock album out, even though it wasn't very good. He had.
Did you just say he had a rock album?
Yeah.
No.
Or at least a rock song, yeah.
Was it like a Toby Keith song or what?
No, it was a 1980s-esque song.
Real quick, Willie Bowen with another joke. When small wrestlers do promo, is it short and sweet? Nice one.
You know why there's no midget wrestlers in the NWA? Tires hate them.
Tires hate them. Shit.
Get in my belly.
Hey, I have a question for you, Jaden, Jay.
All right.
Related to Sgt Slaughter.
Okay.
Yes, you puke, you maggot, you slime.
Did AWA screw up by not putting the world title on him during the height of his popularity?
Wasn't he a heel in the AWA, or am I missing this?
No, he was heel in the NWA. He was heel in the WWF, but I don't remember other than when he was Super Destroyer Mark II. I don't think he was ever heel in the AWA.
Okay.
Yeah, he turned face in WWE after running into the Iron Sheik. And then he was a face from then on. He left, went to AWA, where he was a face. They created the Americas Championship for him, where he carried one of Vern Guyon's old world title belts and always had to keep his hand and arm in front of it so you couldn't read it. And then he left and went back to WWE, who immediately, I think their original gimmick may have worked. They turned him heel with the idea that he didn't like all this, with Russia falling or the Soviet Union falling and all that he didn't like this peace stuff. But then they effed it up by teaming him with the Sheiks against the American things in the Gulf War, right? Which made no sense.
He became an Iraqi sympathizer.
Yeah, which made no sense to the storyline they were trying to tell.
But he wants his country back.
Yeah, and then of course after he loses the world title, they finally give him a world title as an obnoxious heel so that he can lose it to Hogan. And then he wanted his country back after that. Everybody was right with everything they said about him. But he was basically given a title because Hogan couldn't beat Warrior, so they had to put someone in between. So, but my question is, should the AWA have put the title on him?
When he did the AWA, when he was the America's champion, yes. When it was the Zbyszko time, yes, but I don't think at that point it was going to be. He was definitely not on the peak of his career. He was still with the G.I. Joe phase, and he saw a lot of popularity because of that. But I don't think he was at the point then where it would have made a difference one way or the other to the AWA.
I think instead of Bockwinkel, he should have been given the title.
Bockwinkel had a few runs.
Well, I'm talking about the final one when they did the new belt and Hansen head took off and everything like that.
I mean,
I always felt like
you froze. Is DK froze for everyone or just me?
No, he was frozen.
Okay.
Can you hear us? Can you hear us, DK?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, you've been warmed up.
Okay. Good. So, what was the last thing you heard me saying?
Yeah.
I was going to say you were talking about the bipartisan politics, and then you just kind of froze there.
Oh, that was.
You were talking about Bockwinkel when they gave the belt back to him. There was rumors that he was set to beat Hansen for it at one time. But Hansen was bringing it back to, apparently they tried to get him to drop the title before he went back to Japan, but the deal was the title was sold to All Japan bought the title for Hansen for him to defend there in Japan. And apparently Slaughter was one of the ones that he was asked to drop the belt to that he refused.
Well, according to Hansen in later interviews, his claim was Bunny Underwood. His claim was that when the original agreement was made, Hansen wasn't actually looking to win the title. He never
lobbied for it.
Yeah, he never lobbied for it. To the best of his knowledge, Bobbin never lobbied for it. But they wanted to put the title on. They want to take the title off Rick Martel for a short run and then have Martel win the title again. And so the idea was he was going to win the title, and then a few months later Martel was he was going to do the favor, and that was the actual phrase he used. I was going to do the favor for Martel in Montreal. That was the plan. But then in typical times, WWE screwed it up by taking Martel. And so then they were looking for someone to beat him, but Hanson would only do it if it was cleared through Baba. And so supposedly what happened the night he walked out was that they told him he was losing the belt to Bockwinkel that night. They had not said anything prior to it. They just told him that night, you're losing the belt to Bockwinkel. He called Baba. Baba said, he goes, hey, I already got you booked where I'm got you as the champion. Not necessarily title defenses, but, you know, he was supposed to be there and be presented as the AWA champion. And so he told them no. He goes, I'm not losing tonight. He goes, I'll lose after my next tour. And they said, no, you're losing tonight. So he took the belt and walked out. And apparently they figured something might happen because they had already had the new belt made.
Oh.
And so, which, by the way, I always hated the new one.
It was based off an old one.
Yeah. And
getting back to the crux.
We're getting back to that because then we'll sooner or later get back to the NWA.
No, I wanted you asked the question. What did they make a mistake by not putting the title on him? I always thought the crux of the AWA, the whole reason why Hogan never got the title was because Vern wanted true pro wrestlers to be champions. He wanted guys who were actual workers, right? Not just show, but the actual wrestling. So by that definition, Slaughter was never like a good hooker in a sense that he'd go out there and protect himself. He wouldn't have the same match that you'd have with like a Vern or a Larry Zbyszko. Like he couldn't get out there and defend himself that way, right? It was more of a show, wasn't it?
No, Slaughter could really wrestle when need to be.
I guess I never saw that side of him.
So watch some of his NWA stuff, or when the WWE let him do it, some of his WWF stuff. He actually was a very good wrestler when he needed to be, but at the Slaughter gimmick, he didn't need to do as much of it as soon as he became that top hot babyface.
Yeah, in Mid-Atlantic, he was a pretty solid guy.
Okay.
And
there was very few people that got over in Mid-Atlantic that weren't good wrestlers. Jimmy Valiant.
Sounds like you're calling somebody out there.
No.
Well, if I don't want to get under a glass table and say anything disparaging, but
Jimmy Valiant.
He wasn't a very good wrestler.
Boogie
But
Woogie,
a lot of the Mid-Atlantic territory, you generally had to be a pretty good wrestler to truly get over, with rare exceptions. I mean, Abby got over huge there, but
so
yeah.
DK, I'm assuming that you thought it was a bad idea not to put the belt on Sgt. Slaughter?
I think he would have been a better choice than Bockwinkel at the time. And I mean, I know you guys like Bockwinkel, and I like him too. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I just feel like that time was the wrong time for him. And then, also to twice be given the title, I just didn't think it worked as well.
I hated that they gave it to him, but I didn't mind him as champion. In fact, if it wasn't for that championship, we wouldn't have got that Bockwinkel versus Hennig Classic. Or Bockwinkel putting over Hennig for the championship.
When you think of the AWA, what's your Mount Rushmore?
My Mount Rushmore?
Of the AWA, yes.
Well, I never ever liked Vern Gagne, so he would have been an AWA Mount Rushmore. He wasn't my Mount Rushmore. Bockwinkel is easily on that list. I loved Mad Dog Vachon.
Wow, okay.
That was 100%. That wasn't a gimmick at all for me. Mad Dog Vachon was pretty much, that's who he was.
And his brother.
Yeah, Butcher Paul. Butcher Paul was the sane one. I figured that one out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love Zbyszko. I just thought Zbyszko was great, whether he was champion or the America's champion or coming out with a ninja and nunchucks. I just always a big Zbyszko fan. And I guess Slaughter.
What? No love for the Crusher? No love for Jerry Blackwell?
They didn't like Blackwell either. I never understood Blackwell. Everybody's talking about a big man doing a dropkick. He had a shitty dropkick. He wasn't Bam Bam Bigelow. Which, by the way, I just saw his Dark Side, and it was really good, even though they left a lot out.
Well,
What did you think of?
My problem with
Yeah,
the
DK.
AWA, to me, I saw it in two different. It's always been two different stages for me, and there was like the Stan Hansen and before, and then after, and I just felt like after was never that good. Like, yeah, Curt Hennig was the world champion. I liked Curt Hennig, but I didn't feel like they overly used him well or whatever. Jerry Lawler was almost, ridiculous. And of course, he gave up the title. And by the time he gave up the title and Zbyszko won it, it's like, does the title mean anything anymore?
I love the Lawler era because that's when they were using multiple promotions part of the deal. I mean, I loved when they took the few talents the AWA had with World Class and Continental and Memphis, and even that women's promotion, I forget what it was called, but they all kind of mixed it together. It wasn't Glow, it was POW. That's right. It was POW, Powerful Women of Wrestling, which I always thought, isn't that POW? But I love that era because there was a lot of talent being showcased. Kerry Von Erich, Jeff Jarrett, the Samoan SWAT team, Michael Hayes, Wahoo McDaniels.
But not always in AWA. Like, I saw a lot of it, but...
Yeah, but the television was great.
Wouldn't have gone to an AWA show. But...
You would have gone to an AWA show?
Not... Just an AWA show, like during the Lawler era, not a show that was joint with Tennessee or Texas or whatever. And let me tell you, don't you think they wish they had put the title on Kerry Von Erich that night?
I don't think so. Not that night. I don't think so.
No, well, I'm just talking about after what's his name. So, okay, I got another world title. I'm legitimate. Bye.
He left because of money. They didn't pay him. Just like almost all the talent that was part of that.
Well, yeah, there are other. That's one of those things that there are a ton of stories behind, and they're all a little bit true, and none of them completely.
I think my Mount Rushmore, because I was such a huge Rick Martel fan, he goes on there, Zbyszko goes on there, and then probably Road Warriors?
Even though they were AWA, I never considered them AWA. I considered Adrian Adonis more AWA than the Road Warriors. At least when he was AWA, it was great.
The East Coast, West Coast connection.
It was interesting in that the Road Warriors came in, won the titles immediately, wrestled for a year as champions, lost the titles, and left. They were basically only there as the tag team champions.
I remember the old AWA Remco figures, and I remember like Baron von Raschke, and they had the Freebirds and Jimmy Garvin and Baby Doll, and it's like, weren't these guys all NWA Mid-Atlantic and Georgia wrestlers? Like, how'd they end up as AWA figures?
They were AWA guys at the time. In fact, the whole Pro Wrestling USA allegedly is why the Road Warriors and Jimmy Garvin and even Steve Regal for a short time ended up, and even Baron von Raschke ended up in the Mid-Atlantic area. Apparently, the stories are Crockett tried to steal all their top talent and bring it to that. He even tried to take Slaughter.
Well, that was one of the big ones also where they were talking about money in that the promoters claim that the shows were arranged by Gagne and he was supposed to pay the talent. And Gagne told them, no, your promoter's supposed to pay your thing. And so that's one of the reasons it fell apart so quickly. And one of the reasons why Fritz never really contributed any talent to it. Because people forget that wasn't just a Jim Crockett AWA. Several promoters were originally supposed to be part of it, including Fritz. And most of them was like, well, let's see how this goes first. And it didn't go well. And they said, yeah, no, we're not doing this.
Yeah, Crusher, Maurice, Mad Dog, Vachon. There's a lot of guys that I remember popping up with those AWA Remco figures. I remember Larry Zbyszko. I remember you said Steve Regal, and that made me pop because everyone thinks of Steve Regal as the guy in the WWE, WCW, but no one remembers Mr. Electricity Steve Regal, and Jimmy Garvin, and Jim Brunzell, and Greg Gagne, the High Flyers. So, all right, well,
Kurt Hennig.
Yeah,
there
Kurt Hennig,
was
of course.
Yeah, there was the Freebirds,
the Long Riders.
Dick Worley.
Unfortunately for the Long Riders, once they left Texas, they were never anywhere long. And then Scott got cancer, and that cut their time short. But yeah, because they went to Memphis, they won the national championship in Georgia, and were gone within 2 months, and they were only in Memphis for a couple of months, and they probably stayed the longest in AWA, but they weren't there real long.
I remember the Super Destroyers being around in Georgia way longer than the Long Riders. I think they lost the masks in Georgia, and that's where they became the Long Riders.
Texas.
Was it Texas?
Yep, they lost to Iceman
King Parsons, right?
And that child molester.
Boris Zukov.
Not poor Boris Zukov. Leave that Russian Boris Zukov out of there.
Buck Sumov.
Oh, that's right. Retractions and apologies.
So anyway, yeah, and we've talked about this before offline. I think we talked about it before on the show. Is that people go, oh, well, what's the difference between the Super Destroyers and the Long Riders? And if you watch, they were different. They wrestled differently in the ring.
Yeah,
they were different characters, and it's one of those things that a lot of people don't understand. That Bill Eadie or whatever once said, Bipo Mongo was different than the Masked Superstar, and the Masked Superstar was different than Axe. He goes, they weren't all the same wrestler. You were different each way. God, no. No, absolutely not. So anyway, we've wasted 51 minutes. So what else do we need to talk about?
Okay, so I allowed you to have that time, but now we're going to talk about some fun stuff. So there's a couple of shows happening this week.
You allowed us to have this time?
Yes, absolutely, I did.
Don't you know DK will just talk and not let anybody have any time if they need to?
Look, I'm not trying to pull rank here, but I'm the only one that can mute the microphones on this end. There's several shows that are happening this week. In fact, 2 of them happening tomorrow night, one of them happening Saturday, where there's a lot of NWA talent appearing on these shows. And it begs the question with the fact that in the past, the NWA, I know this might not be a thing going forward, but have worked with Wildcat in Louisiana, working with Joe Cazana in Knoxville. But also this Friday night, Kross Fire Wrestling is going to feature a lot of current talents in the NWA. The women's TV champion Kenzie Paige is wrestling in an intergender match. Kylie will be in action. The number 1 contender to the World Junior Heavyweight Championship, Colby Corino, will be wrestling on that card. And Kerry Morton's defending the World Junior Heavyweight Championship at Kross Fire Pro Wrestling. I believe they wrestle out of Kentucky against Rolando Freeman. So I mean, on the 28th, tomorrow night, that's a loaded card for Kross Fire Wrestling. It's very heavy on NWA talent. Also on Friday night in I think it's in Tinsley, Illinois, Tinley Park. You've got the World Association of Wrestling North America, which is the North American version of the Knight Family's UK promotion. They're going to have talents both from the past and present NWA. The last NWA North American champion, Mustang Mike, a former NWA National Champion, the Golden Boy, Greg Anthony. Both those guys will be in action. The Hawaiian Hitman Koa Lexamana, I don't think I said that right, who we most recently saw wrestle Ricky Morton on NWA Power. He will be in action along with his valet, Kallies Malia. Samantha Starr is going to be wrestling Thom Latimer. In fact, both Samantha Starr and Thom Latimer are wrestling for WAW Championships on Friday night. And, of course, the highlight of the night will be Kamille defending the World Women's Championship against Saraya Knight, all taking place in Tinley Park. So there's two shows that are very independent of the NWA, but heavily featuring current NWA talent. And then, of course, the Love Alive charity, which our friend the Pope, who shouted us out on his, or I guess Poyo did, shouted us out on that podcast. They're going to be having their show on Saturday, the Great American Clash. It'll feature talents previously associated with the NWA, like, of course, the Pope and JTG, who is their champion. But it also will feature Jamie Stanley and Eric Jackson of Power, taking place on Saturday. So, like, there's, and when you look at these event posters, the thing that you're noticing more and more these days is that the NWA logo is featured next to whichever wrestler will be appearing on these shows. So when KFW is promoting the World Junior Heavyweight Championship with Rolando Freeman challenging Kerry Morton, they're putting an NWA logo next to that wrestler. Same thing with World Association of Wrestling in Tinley Park. It says they're representing talents from the NWA. Is this kind of like a soft introduction to the territory system? Do you think this is something that maybe Billy, he told us early on that the NWA could be whatever he wants it to be. DK, do you think this is a soft opening, a soft introduction to a new territory?
No, not new territory. But I do think it's a better way of getting your name out there in some of these areas.
Okay.
In that, people see what they like when Kamille comes in. Well, where can I see Kamille? Well, watch their YouTube show or whatever.
Right.
So you almost got to think of it as an advertising thing. I don't know if they charge these people for the NWA name or title defense or anything like that. I tend to think not. But what you can get is you can get some free advertisement out of it. Especially if they put out any type of flyer or whatever, you can go as seen on YouTube's NWA Power or something. What they need to be getting out of it. So, no, not territory, but maybe more working. What we really need is for the NWA to be more recognizing of these things that happen outside of Power. That, they need to be bringing up that more often. They kind of barely do occasionally. But they need to bring up more often that, Kamille was recently defended her title in
Abu Dhabi,
whatever, wherever, No Name, California, and somewhere Arkansas, and
Intercourse, Pennsylvania,
right? The end of the world, New Jersey.
Truth or Consequences, New Mexico.
Oh shit! Bring up a true place. But then again, if you had said Tucumcari, New Mexico, it almost would have sounded as fake. But Yeah. So, but Red
There
River
actually is an Intercourse, Pennsylvania, by the way.
I know that.
Yeah.
And so
Where they have sex.
Not real. And so yeah, no to a new territory, but yes to a better way of getting the name out.
Jaden, what is your take on it?
One thing that I always, and I know since David Marquez is now listening, that you're probably going to hear me say this. One time he said, like, "Oh, why do you put WWF Superstar, WWE Superstar in the poster? If that good, they were that important, and they were that big of a draw, you don't need to put that." But that's not why you should put that. There is a thing I learned in business class that a lot of bars or a lot of places will use a Pepsi or Coke banner with the Pepsi or Coke logo and have their prices for their items in there. They just happen to sell Pepsi or Coke. And a lot of bars would have Budweiser or Heineken or something on their banner. What they would use that banner, the banners were basically given to them by those companies. They would print up on there their specials of the week or whatever. What you are doing in that situation is you're not trying to say, "Oh, look, we got Coke here," or we have this. The reason you're doing that is because it creates an association with a successful brand. And when you have an association with a successful brand, it creates the illusion that you're a successful brand. It is borrowing that goodwill, that je ne sais quoi, that marketing power. Borrowing some of that to try to add credibility to your own business. It's the same thing we're using WWE or WCW or ECW or Impact or AEW, or in this case the NWA. You're trying to use any power that has in drawing that people care about and trying to associate it with your company to make your company look bigger. So that's what I believe is going on. I don't believe it's a territorial system. I don't think there's any want or desire to do a territorial system, or they would have already done it. They could have done it when they were working with Marquez and with Wildcat and the Cazanas and stuff like that, and just had them run NWA with different talent at different events and stuff like that, and keep the name out there while they would push the big television tapings and the pay-per-views instead. So the ability to do it is something that can be done. I don't see Billy doing it, and the time I think if he was ever going to do it is well past. Yeah. So now that Jay's gone, let's talk bad about him.
Oh, are we supposed to wait for him to be gone before we do that?
No, but it just gives more. He won't mute us now.
That's true. So let you have that time, boy. Don't you know I know how to pull the plug on your whole house? Anyway, so that brings an interesting point. At what point is if you're booking somebody like Kevin Nash, you may not need to put WWE, former WWE, WCW superstar Kevin Nash. But when you're booking somebody, and I hate to use this example, but it's the first one that's popping in mind, Tyrus. I mean, do you have to put WWE with him? Because who really knows who the hell Tyrus is?
At least he has a look that's somewhat familiar. He has a unique look. A lot of the WWE guys currently don't have that. They all kind of just are the same.
Well, okay, let's look at somebody else in NWA currently. Chris Adonis, Chris Masters. I mean, yeah. Does he need WWE before his name for people to understand kind of who he is and remind people?
I think if a lot of the people that do, they don't promote the NWA Chris Adonis. They do former WWE superstar Chris Masters, or Chris Adonis, formerly known as WWE superstar Chris Masters. But again, it's not necessarily the wrestler needs the WWE. It's the promotions trying to associate themselves with the WWE to make them look bigger.
Yeah, I just didn't know because, like, again, if you said someone like, Kevin Nash, X-Pac, some of those, you wouldn't have to put it on there because people know where they're from.
They still do, though, again, because of association. I've seen a poster for one of those big time type shows, like Big Time Wrestling or something like that, where everybody on the poster had something on it. They had Impact, they had Ring of Honor, they had NWA, they had WWE, they had WCW, the ECW, they had AWA, they had, Mama's Wrestling Promotion. They had everything. Somebody had something next to it that was featured on the card. So I even seen one time there was a poster where. Yes, but I've seen it done. I've even seen one time posters. I've seen a poster where somebody said a scene on Jerry Springer.
Oh, geez.
It was a wrestler who was on Jerry Springer, and they put that on there.
That's amazing.
Thanks for joining the stream. This has been a presentation of Alliance-Wrestling.com. We genuinely appreciate your support. Would you consider subscribing so you'll never miss a future episode? I'd also like to remind you we do a live stream every Tuesday at 5 p.m. before NWA Power. You can find us on social media at The Alliance Blog. And until next time, we are The Alliance.